So firstly, thank you again to everyone who's agreed to come here today for another edition of the Privacy Roundtable. Today's topic is a huge topic, potentially, which is the advent of AI and what it means for our privacy. And as is included in the title, we've got special guests today from the Zano project. Just before I start, I'd like to thank Yanachar from the PivX project for being here, and hopefully Ruben from Firo will be joining us in a moment as well. I know he'll have made some special arrangements because I know it's their sort of Christmas dinner time. I am an advisor to the Particle project, and the Particle project is responsible for the Particle marketplace and basic swap DEX. But cryptos, how do I pronounce this, by the way? Crypto Solway? I can't quite get that right. How would you like to be?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, I don't know I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but I prefer Crypto Solway. Whatever it works for you, yeah.
No, I like Crypto Sol. I like that. So Crypto Sol, firstly, you're from the Zano project. You're the lead researcher. Welcome aboard today, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest. Just kind of, we've introduced our projects before, but as you're sort of new to this, would you care to sort of tell us a little bit about Zano? That would be really appreciated. I know you've got a very interesting history with that project, so feel free to just sort of take the stage and introduce yourself.
Thank you guys for the invitation. I'm a lead research developer at Zano project, and Zano is a privacy project, privacy coin, with a hybrid proof of work and proof of stake consensus from the inception. Zano started as a crypto node coin, as evolution of Bulberry coin by Crypto Zoidberg back in 2019, and like the whole target, the goal of our project is to advance the privacy and to bring the other cool features such as proof of stake to the privacy level. Also, I'm a co-author of the Zircanum. It is proof of stake with hidden amount cryptographic scheme that we came up with Ko, who is a research developer at Monero, and in 2021. Now Zano is going forward, and we are looking forward to see in like very soon time a great privacy update when we introduce confidential assets. So it's the ability to create full anonymous assets inside the Zano. He or she wouldn't know what kind of assets you're transferring. So that's our goal at that moment. And yeah, I think that for a short introduction, that's pretty much it.
No, that was a great introduction. I just want to thank you again. I just have a few quick questions, and just one thing I want to point out. You guys were the originators of the CryptoNote protocol, and that is the foundation that's the foundational base for Monero. And I remember Bulberry back in the day. Just a general question: what sort of made you sort of build Zano as a project from scratch, as opposed to say continuing the work from Bulberry or applying to another project in existence altogether? What led you to the creation of Zano?
Well, yeah, thank you. It's a good question. So Bulberry was evolution of a crypto node protocol. Is implementation, like I think it's maybe first implementation. I'm not sure. Better to ask Crypto Zoidberg, the author of crypto node.
It's the first. It was the first. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah. So after a few years of development, he decided to get further, and he came up with the idea. As far as I know, maybe I'm not too like I'm trying not to miss a bit here. He came up with the idea of proof of stake hybrid consensus, and he implemented a proof of stake, a proof of work hybrid consensus using the ideas from Peercoin project, incorporating a proof of stake that is fully egalitarian. So everyone is even using like small amount of coin, 1 coin, for instance, is able to stake, and its stake not locked. And this is like similarly convenient scheme was incorporated, and few issues and few challenges arise from that. So the Crypto Zoidberg started Zano as a project to solve all these new technologies, and I joined team at that moment.
And is that, I'm interested in the hybrid aspect of it. And so like I know, like Decred has a hybrid model, right? Where you have miners doing the proof of work consensus, and then that's kind of validated at a second level using the proof of stake consensus. How does Zano combine the two?
We don't have a validator nodes. So our blockchain, our network is like one level network, and each node in charge of validating all the blocks that is in the blockchain.
Okay. And so does each node then runs both like proof of stake and proof of work?
Like if you would like to mine a proof of work, you just run a like normal proof of work miner using a miner rig or something. And if you would like to stake your coins, like to be a proof of stake miner, you just need a stake of coins.
Got it.
And
so you can do it either way. So you can.
Yes. Yeah.
Like everybody said. But then, how do you decide how to trade off the ability to mine with proof of work versus proof of stake? What determines the trade-off? I mean, how much work equals how many coins?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Well, I have to say that I'm sorry. I have to say that like I'm not the guy behind the consensus.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
It's Crypto Zoidberg, but I try to answer a question. So maybe it's better if you like to know all the details about this very interesting protocol. Maybe it's better to ask him, but I'll try. So we have difficulties running separately for proof of work and proof of stake. So for instance, if you have increase in proof of work power, then difficulty increases, and vice versa. And if you have new coins get into the proof of stake, for instance, some huge staker sitting around and doing nothing, and his or her coins are not participating in the staking, and after that he or she decided to turn the staking on, and at that point the staking power is increased, and so correspondingly staking difficulties increasing also. So it's a kind of like two kind of blocks living together in the same blockchain, but consensus rules made in such a way that subchain that has like more diverse in terms of proof of stake and proof of work. For instance, like you have a subchain that consists of only proof of work block, and as an alternative subchain, you have a subchain consisting of proof of work and proof of stake blocks going one after one. And the rules is made in such a way that the second one will be more preferable. It will get more score.
That's very interesting. So you have a measure of like the quality of the chain, and if you make a new block, that's cool. Very cool.
One thing I wanted to ask you guys is how you sort of went about achieving privacy within a proof of stake protocol. I'd be really sort of interested to hear how you achieved that.
Thank you for the question. This was like at first we were like use open amounts. So when we use proof of stake model, we used like direct proof of stake scheme from the peer coin. That means that for each block you have to calculate so-called actual difficulty. So you take the current proof of stake difficulty that you have on network, and then you divide it by the amount of the stake that you are using for stake this particular block. And as a result, the more stake, the more amount you have, the less difficulty, the less actual difficulty you have to achieve. So you create some special data structure, you put your output in this data structure, and you calculate hash, and you compare the hash with some boundary. And if a result is less than boundary, okay, you win, you're able to make a block. And the probability of such a winning event is corresponding to, like, it's linear to the amount of stake you have. And you actually, all you need is to check all the outputs that, like unspent outputs, we living in unspent outputs model. So you have to check all the unspent outputs that you have, you put it in this data structure, you calculate the hash, you compare your hash with the boundary, and if you win, okay, you go ahead and make a block. And the main disadvantage of this scheme is that you, for external observer on the blockchain, to be able to verify this this proof of stake block, he or she need to know what amount actually you used for staking, because he need to calculate the actual difficulty to make all the calculations. And so that's necessary to reveal this amount. And it was a challenge for us. We decided at some point, Zano started to move from the open amount, like it was in CryptoNote and Bulberry, to the hidden amount, like it in Monero and other projects, using a ring signature and producing commitments. And we faced the challenge how this model, how to adapt this proof of stake model to the hidden amounts. We cannot reveal it. So I know there are projects that actually use hidden amount, but for the proof of stake block, they, like in such of transactions, such as proof of stake transactions, they reveal the amount. And we decided that we cannot afford revealing, so we're trying to solve it. Actually, we came up with a solution. It's called Zercanum. It's proof of stake scheme with a hidden amount, so as we call it. And I come up with the original idea. Then I get a very valuable feedback from Koi, from Monero. Then we ask him to participate as a co-author of the paper, and then we together elaborate it to like more advanced scheme that, and try to eliminate all the possible attacks to this scheme. So it's 2 years from the creation of this scheme. Now it's implemented in Zano, and we are very ready to release it. So we will be releasing it in a few weeks.
Oh, that's awesome. And I guess just before we shift onto the main topic, do you have any sort of links you'd recommend just in terms of finding out more about your project?
Yeah, sure. If you would like to know more about Zano, please go to our website or Zano.org, or to our Discord. Basically, Zano.org is the main resource, because you will find the links, all our social medias, to Discord channel, to Telegram channel, and of course to GitHub.
That's much appreciated, and I'll certainly be looking a little bit deeper into this. So we'll move on to the main topic now. And I just wanted to thank you for just so much for taking the time to sort of explain your project. And a reminder to
thank you. That was an excellent explanation. Very interesting.
And I just want to say, to anyone listening, if you happen to represent a privacy project, these are the Privacy Roundtables. We are open to all projects. This is about sharing knowledge of different projects and technologies and answering important questions. And with that in mind, I'm going to move on to the main topic now. And I'm hoping to kind of get insights and input from everyone in the room, but particularly sort of our sort of co-hosts, Yen Char, CryptoSoul, and Ruben, who, Yen and Ruben have been doing this with me for some time now. The topic is the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, and what it means for our privacy. And before I kind of lead into the discussion, I kind of want to frame it into three discrete categories, if that's okay, because I've given this some thought, and I think this could be a huge topic that sprawls for hours and hours on end. I am not going to kid you on this. I'm conscious of we've got a fair amount of openness with time, but I wanted to divide it into three broad topics to kind of focus in on. So the first area we can do this in any order, but in my mind, I've got three categories, which is the impact of AI on public blockchains, the impact of AI on privacy-based blockchain, and then the impact of AI on privacy in general. And each of those could be an entire discussion in its own right that could span an hour easily. But I'm going to kind of open it to my co-hosts to just pick one and run with it. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Cool. Yen, have you got any if we're sort of
Sure.
Have you got any sort of thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great subdivision. I have thoughts on all of them, but I'll start with the first one, like its effect on public blockchains. And it kind of ties, I think, into the second one too, because it's a motivator in a way for private blockchains. But I think, we think of like OpenAI, and of course, like AI has been around for a long time, right? Since the 50s, arguably. What's really new and gotten everybody's attention here lately are the large language models, which are associated with deep learning and so forth. And OpenAI, came out with ChatGPT, and we've got all these new tools. And I think a way those new tools and AI in general factor into public blockchains is the risk of analyzing and disclosing what people are doing, and especially on the part of governments who have the resources to do it. I mean, a lot of, like, if you take Bitcoin, okay, when it first came out, people thought, it's private because it's pseudonymous and nobody knows who has whose address. Well, they soon figured out, you could tie that together with other data, like data from exchanges of who bought Bitcoin and what address they transferred it to. And once you make that connection between people and addresses with Bitcoin, it's all over, right? Then everything's trackable pretty much forever, unless you use like a really sophisticated mixer. Well, what a lot of that can just be analyzed with AI. And I think that's the risk. And governments, they can get data from exchanges. It's been public. They've been doing it like with Coinbase and others. They can get data from places where you buy things, all this data, tie it together, use algorithms and AI to put it all together and pretty much know everything with something like Bitcoin, or almost everything. They can't know everything, but almost. And I think that is going to be a motivator for private blockchains, which kind of ties into the second one. And I think it's really important, what we all are doing in this, those of us participating in this forum, making privacy available that can be immune to even like very intelligent and very capable AI engines. So that'd be my perspective on how it impacts public blockchains.
Yen, any thoughts? Sorry, Ruben, any thoughts?
No, I mean, nothing in particular. I mean, of course, now as Yen said, like, people always think of AI as just those LLMs, but I mean, I don't think it has so much impact on, like, machine learning, I guess, would help to I guess automate the finding of links and all of that. I'm pretty sure that's already being done. I'm pretty sure firms that chain analysis, they're not obviously not doing it by hand, right? So I guess whether we can consider it true AI or rather just some form of assisted analysis, that's a different thing. So I don't think if you talk about LLMs, I don't think it's a direct impact on public blockchains, but I guess in the sense that when we start having LLMs, or what they call like a general AI, right? That they call the artificial general intelligence, where you can just feed it data, AGI, right? And start feeding it data sets, and then it can start combining things all together. Obviously, this thing becomes a lot easier to track, a lot easier to look for things. But at the same time, I do feel that we already kind of have the technology to do that. It's just that all these tools aren't very publicly available at the moment. I mean, that's just my guess, right? Because we don't exactly know what all these closed source tools that current chain analysis firms impact. But I'm pretty sure that whatever tools that they develop, they're just going to get better. And I think with especially public blockchain analysis, there's not so much about the actual blockchain analysis. Is more about combining different data sets to get a complete picture, and that will be data that's outside the blockchain. And that, to me, that would be the real risk rather than artificial intelligence specifically. Yeah.
CryptoSol, any thoughts?
I agree with Roman, and I would like to add that maybe I think that one advantage of using emerging of AI will be source code quality, because using AI, it would be easier to spot kind of issue in the code that could be used in a bad way, and on the same time, it would be easier for developer to spot such an issue and to fix it during the development stage. So it will be kind of race. So you need to be prepared, and you need to scan your code, your source code, more thoroughly. And of course, that would be interesting, and because I think attackers soon will be using AI-powered source code scanner for bugs and for issues. So it soon will be probably obligatory for development team to use AI. Also, I agree that using AI for collecting data will be a threat for privacy blockchains. But on the same time, I think that privacy is evolving, in privacy for privacy coin for cryptocurrency world. So there are new technology that's known as full membership proof. I know that people from Firo are interested in that technology and participating in discussion. And we at Zano are also very closely looking at what is happening on this field. And as far as I know, it's not ready. But when after some time, maybe in a span of a year or two, it probably would be ready, and we at Zano will be happy to implement it. And I think it would be much easier to defeat this kind of threats. So that's what I think about it.
Improving the source code is a good one. That's a very good one.
Yeah, just to clarify what CryptoSol meant by full membership proofs. Basically, I mean, it's just another way. Because in constructions that Firo uses, and let's say like Monero, they kind of use like ring signatures as kind of like their membership proof. And in Spark and Lelantis, we're currently using a proof called one of many proofs, but they are still kind of like limited to like high tens of thousands before the performance gets too crap. So of course, this is not a problem with PivX, which is using Zcash tag, but the full membership proof basically allows you to have, every single transaction in the history is scalable enough to include all transactions in the history in that particular anonymity set. So basically achieving a Zcash type of privacy, but through a different method, which I guess is a bit more modular. So yeah, just a bit of feedback on that.
It's achieving PivX level privacy, right?
Yeah, it's achieving basically Zcash level privacy with a different tag, no trusted setup, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruben. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think that's a really useful starting point. And again, I think I hadn't considered the impact on source code analysis. One thing that's going through my mind, and I think it's something I want to kind of draw as a distinction between AI, or well, AGI, and not that we're not quite there at AGI yet, but certainly against LLMs, AI type applications versus traditional algorithms. I think a really useful distinction is with a lot of traditional analysis, you use algorithms which are fairly open to inspection. Whereas I don't think this is quite the right way of saying it, but with AIs, it's more like a dynamically evolving algorithm. And it's because it's dynamically evolving in response to its own sort of feedback loops, it's a lot more of a black box as to what's going on, as to why an AI is making the decisions that it makes. So if you kind of look at the AI applications, if they are giving you unexpected outputs or hallucinating or things that are clearly erroneous, the actual process of interrogating them is different to just looking at the code in a more traditional sense. And to me, I think that's interesting because it has implications when you're looking at public blockchains. You're essentially looking at a stream of very publicly viewable data, and with an algorithm, you're just basically, I feel like in some ways you can, I don't want to talk too much out of my depth here, but with an algorithm, the inferences are more concrete in that you can see how the inferences have been made. With an AI, that's not necessarily the case. And the thing is, AIs are very capable of making inferences which are very accurate, but they're not always accurate. And I think it creates some interesting problems because with public blockchains, if you have a stream of publicly viewable financial data, it's very easy for an AI with enough access. If you look at how AI techs currently work, they scrape the internet for vast amounts of data. Whether that's obtained with the consent of the data owners or not, that's a different question entirely. But they scrape vast amounts of data from vast reaches of the internet. And I think if you're using AIs that can scrape KYC type data and then link that into transaction data on public blockchains, I think it opens a full can of worms to all the inferences you could make. And I think an area of AI development is predicting people's transaction behaviors and predicting who the identities of obscured participants in a transaction chain are, just based on on observing the flow. So I think it enables a more sophisticated form of chain analysis than what we currently have, but one that's still potentially prone to errors, which may not be so easy, or which may require different means of interrogation.
Right.
I mean, I think one of the things we have to note that, like, chain analysis versus something like those large language modelers and logic, it's definitely a lot, like I would say, several magnitudes easier because it's just processing data and trying to find the links between them. Because AIs are good at that, but I don't think it's like more difficult than trying to come up with poetry. And of course, I don't know if any of us are AI experts here, but it just seems like in the the realm of computer difficulty. I do think linking data sets with each other and trying to find patterns with it is not even something that's particularly new, but maybe it will probably be accelerated by like AI models, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's certainly true, Ruben, of like the blockchain itself. It seems like that, like Bitcoin blockchain, making the connections, right? It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't require that level of sophistication. But when you're bringing in outside data, that outside data can be just as complicated as you can imagine, and the connections can be very complicated. You know, like Dr. Cap was saying, scrape the internet. How do you? I mean, that's a lot of data, right? A lot of data in different forms and complex. So it seems to me like there's a little bit of an arms race there too, right? People like Chainalysis keeps coming up with new ways, and people come up with ways to defeat it, and AI will advance that ability to tie that complex data together and to defeat attempts to work around it. Maybe.
I think the other thing, if it kind of helps put a bit of context on this as to why I'm talking about this, is it's the idea of hallucinations and you seeing. Okay, I'll give you the example. So I was in 2019. I was with the Particle Project, and we were in a startup conference in Finland called Slush, which is a huge startup conference. And they were like, to put it into perspective, I think there were like he's approaching 1,000 booths, that big a startup conference. It's one of the biggest in the world. We were wandering from booth to booth. One of the things I came across, which I found really interesting, it was a company that had basically developed a kind of algorithm that basically you'd stand in front of a webcam and it would basically try and predict what your emotional state was. And it will give you scores. It would look at you. The webcam would look at you, it would generate the images, and dynamically it would give you an adjusting score based on your facial expression. And it would say, hostile or nervous or happy or sad. It kind of described these various emotional states. And I stared at this for a minute and thought, okay, how much of this is kind of eye of the believer? And by that, I mean, I stared at it. I thought, okay, I just look more puzzled, but you're saying something else. Whereas it was interesting to look at other people staring at this. And I was just looking at other people staring at this and going, okay, this algorithm, I'm going to call it an algorithm rather than an AI, but it was being marketed as an AI at the time. This algorithm is making a judgment about you, but how genuinely correct is the judgment? And actually, in making that judgment about you, how have you adjusted your perceptions to believe in that? It's a bit like saying, okay, I'm Aquarius, therefore I have this, and this personality traits. And someone who believes in that, my view is, okay, maybe they'll adjust themselves to more fit that archetype rather than it being a reflection of who they were at the time. So if basically what I'm getting as if we place our faith into something like this, how do we genuinely know it's making an accurate judgment? And the reason I say this is it goes down to metadata. We can look at what AI can infer about us, and it can make judgments about us, and it could even tell us to our faces what it thinks about us. But is that actually who we are? And I think that's an important question to consider. But I'll leave it to you guys to consider that if you've got any thoughts.
I think one thing we also have to remember that despite what chain analysis companies claim, and this is a dangerous narrative that chain analysis companies are trying to promote, is that chain analysis is a science, its results are like pretty accurate. You can rely on it like almost entirely, which is kind of a dangerous path, which is why they've been pushing so hard against privacy coins. But you realize that even with transparent chains, yes, they can get a lot of data. Obviously, it's a lot more certain in those cases. But it is still, especially when it comes to evaluating privacy chains, it becomes a lot more this is a guess, this is like
Right.
maybe 30% probability and stuff like that, which in a way it's a bit like a hallucination as well. I mean, like it's different, but the way that these tools are being promoted to regulators and all of these who may not have a full grasp of the technology is that this thing solves money laundering. This thing can trace all that you can when in fact, it's just one of the tools that you can use to help narrow down a certain the amount of information that you need to look through, right? Like recently when Monero's, like their general fund was hacked, right? And there was certain analysis that was being done to show like, oh, this is the flow of the funds, and then people were going like, oh
Right.
yeah, Monero is broken and all of
Yep.
that, which isn't true, but it does help to like narrow things down, right? So like blockchain analysis companies, they already kind of like in a way hallucinating by saying that it's almost an exact certainty when it is still a lot of probability involved. So yeah, I just wanted to share that of course, yes, there's that worry about AI hallucinations, but in a way, right now, the way that blockchain analysis companies are promoting themselves, they kind of already like coming to wrong conclusions from from the data, and people don't really know how to interpret them. Yeah.
Right. Good point. It's scary. It's risky for them to be doing that. I'd add one
Yeah.
thing, Dr. Cap. You're right. These large language models, they have all these weights, right? You can't really analyze what's going on with tradition the way you can like simpler algorithms. But what you can do is you just analyze it the same way you would a person, right? You can probe a person, ask them questions, test them out on things, and that's kind of the way you have to interact. It seems to me with these large language models to get to the bottom of issues. It's a lot like dealing with a person.
It's really interesting you say that. I'm going to get to this after Crypto Soul. Do you have anything to say just before I go for it?
I would like to add that I think it's important to understand whether do you have a ability to check the information that AI algorithm gave you. For instance, if you have an AI powered analysis tool that's telling you that this person, for instance, is spending such amount of money or linked with this real person, I think you have a limited ability to check actually, is it true or not? But in the same time, when the AI-powered tool say that you have a vulnerability in your source code, you actually could check it and answer yourself, is it true or not? And I think it's a matter of checking of is it possible to do this kind of check or not. And yes, I agree with what Dr. Cap said before. So it's an interesting topic. Thank you.
No, I really glad you said that. And it raises a really interesting point, which is that, we're talking about AI, but actually the inferences of AI, are they applying to information which can be objectively assessed by a third party, or are they making inferences and conclusions about information which is fundamentally subjective and is very difficult to assess even by multiple third parties? So I think there's a clear distinction as to the limitations of what, not just algorithmic analysis, but AI can and cannot reliably, reliable is the wrong word, but can and cannot objectively do. And I think there needs to be a clear distinction and understanding, not just within the marketing, Ruben, as you're pointing out quite clearly, but just in a general population sense, because I worry about the upstreams is the wrong word, the downstream effects from this. I worry that, these tools, they're being mismarketed about what they can objectively do. And I think people who aren't so well educated or versed in the nuances of this field are going to make erroneous judgments about what this technology is objectively capable of and what it's objectively not capable of. And I think this may filter through into our broader legislative space. And potentially you could see the evolutions of states or societies that have very to me, future societies, which to me would look like, like say thought control, oh, the AI is saying this, it must be right. Therefore, we should legislate this way. And I could see, and this is the thing we have to be careful about, is the distinction between objective and subjective. If we assume that AI can make accurate calls and accurate judgments about fundamentally subjective data sets, then we're almost treating this, I feel we risk treating it more like a religion. We already are. Culturally, I sense that. But I feel that we risk treating it, we risk turning it into a religion rather than something based on any kind of objective science. And that's kind of I really hate being a doomer, but that is my fear looking at this.
I hope that we are far from point where AI result could be treated legally, like subjective result. And and I agree that it would be a terrible future, maybe a terrible issue. And if for some reason, if some AI-powered tool would say that some information, some very subjective information about some person or some data set or some fonts used in a private blockchain, and with no assertion, with no proofs, and this information is believed by general public to be true, that is real issue. But I think it's kind of out of technical scope. It's more like social and political issue.
I actually think it's a good thing that AIs hallucinate right now, and it's a very anyone who uses ChatGPT on for their work or on a regular basis knows that ChatGPT hallucinates, and that's a good thing because that kind of breeds that culture. Maybe I should not trust the AI too much. I need to do my fact checking. Well, if ChatGPT was working, perfectly for our work and whatnot, then it wouldn't breed this maybe I should fact check it. So in a way, its weaknesses right now is giving us that culture of we should not trust the AI too much. We have to fact check as well. So maybe that's a good thing.
Right. It's like a liar that lies about the things you know, so you know not to trust it on the things you don't.
Like a child,
right?
Sorry, this is actually leading into. So this is leading into the point I wanted to follow from what you sort of said earlier about the inputs equaling the outputs. I think I may have mentioned this several times before. If I haven't, I apologize. But I used to play this game, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. It was released in the, I think, late 90s, and it was basically kind of a civilization game that was based on a future society that fled the planet Earth because the Earth was in collapse due to climate change, mass inequality, yada yada. And they basically, their ship crash lands, it subdivides into several colonies, and they basically start rebuilding society from scratch. And there's a huge number of narratives in this game that relate to the philosophy of governance, philosophy of politics, that relates to sort of artificial general intelligence, the evolution of mankind, transcendence, Gaia theory. There's loads of different themes that run through the plot of this game that are just, which is incredible when you look at the format, which is a Civ game. But one of them was this: you research a technology, and every time you get a new technology, there's always a piece of accompanying text with a voiceover describing something about the narrative of the game. And one of the texts you research is basically I think it's polymorphic sentience is the technology. And the quote was really interesting. I've been trying to kind of find it, but basically it goes, the AI that you have, it basically talks about the AI, or you start with it from the point of this age, and by the time it reaches age 10, it's either going to be perfect at doing the task it's been sort of designed to do, or it could be a completely neurotic mess. and that's the outcome is entirely dependent on how you treat it in its initial formative stages. And I think when we kind of think about things like artificial general intelligence, hallucinations, what could be, yeah. So what could be, but I do apologize. We'll need to get diapers in a second for my kid. But in terms of, that's where the pause was from. But yes, in terms of, if you get it wrong in the early stages, if you mess up those initial inputs, is the system, what's the foundations of your child, as it were? So, what is the foundations of your system? And, can you correct those foundations later if you kind of mess it up? And if you kind of look at the parallels to, human development, I've seen plenty of examples of this in real life in my own personal practice where, it's not universal, but people who have, been subjected to horrifically abusive, constrained lives, people, that really plays into their development in all sorts of ways further downstream. I'm not saying that's everyone, but I think it's worth consideration, the inputs equal the outputs.
Are you changing a baby's diaper while talking about AI on this space?
No, a bunch of diapers have arrived from the Amazon guy downstairs. And my wife was like, she literally interrupted me mid-sentence. And she was like, you need to get the diapers from downstairs. And that's why there was that pause, where did he go? Has he been hit in the head?
Well, I think that's a great point, in all this, and it ties into, some of the worry of things not getting done right. I think that's balanced in part by, a fantastic outcome if it actually is done right. But that depends on the data that goes into the models. And I actually think there's a connection, since we're talking about the connection between crypto and AI. There's a potential connection in using crypto to generate the data that goes into AI. These, as the algorithms get better and better, they're going to be very hungry for data. In fact, data could turn out to be the big bottleneck. Not processing power, not the algorithms, it's getting the data. I mean, how do you know something? You need data to get it. And I'm kind of surprised nobody's come up with a cryptocurrency yet that has as its consensus algorithm some kind of generation of data for AI. I think
God, no, not the AI token.
No, you don't think that's but I mean, whether it's possible or not, there's challenges there. But
if you create it, I'll buy it.
Right. Yeah. So you need somebody who's like a big thinker on that subject to create it. But I think that there's potential there, and people are talking about decentralized AI. So there's I kind of see cryptocurrency and AI's their trajectories going forward is intertwined. I personally do. I mean, the potential to apply cryptocurrency to algorithms and machines was one of the things that originally got me interested in cryptocurrency. I mean, I thought, here's something that like a machine can own. It's kind of unique that way, and the destinies are intertwined in my mind.
Well, it's funny you mentioned this. I'm surprised WorldCoin didn't go in this direction. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like
WorldCoin was the one that analyzed and it gave unique identities to humans, right? That you had to look into the orb. Is that WorldCoin?
Yeah, no, that's the one. I'm just wondering if that's kind of the foundation to perhaps the next stage. I wonder if what you've just described is part of their long-term business plan.
Because it's the same guys. It's OpenAI, or at least Sam Altman is behind that.
Exactly,
and behind OpenAI.
I mean, it would make a lot of sense, and it would be highly monetizable if you're being completely frank. So I completely see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Yes. No. Yeah. Right. Agreed. Now, there's like an identity element there, and I think of identity as, I mean, going forward, it's much more, I mean, like fluid. Like, you know, people are really like getting into like what is an identity. You can have multiple identities now, right? And you can even have an identity that you pass from human to human, and humans can have multiple identities. And the concept of identity is really complex, and they're kind of trying to pull it back to the old way of like one identity, one human. And I'm not, you know, a huge fan of that. I can see a place for that, but that's a little different in my mind, Dr. Kep, than the idea of like using crypto to get data. I mean, you need, like, if you can kind of envision a future where people, instead of like doing the thing, they're generating data to feed into an AI for that AI to be able to do the thing, right? And how do you organize that? And if you want them both to be decentralized, it's kind of natural to pay for that that data generation with crypto, right? If they're both decentralized, you don't want to pull in fiat. And why not have it be part of a consensus algorithm? I don't know.
No,
Hey, box mining.
Say that again.
No, box mining is here. Yeah, he's a OG YouTuber. No, not really YouTuber. I guess like crypto YouTuber. So yeah, he's listening on the space. So I just wanted to say hi. Yeah.
no, that's really cool. I was going to say, before I see where you're getting with. I get where you're coming from with that. It's, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think fiat would be. I certainly don't think traditional fiat. It's just simply, there's too much friction for such an interface to work. So I see what. Yeah, okay, that's clearer in my mind. It's. Yeah. Okay. There's one thing I wanted to steer this conversation to, because actually it relates. It was a thought I had in relation to the impact on privacy coins and the privacy economy. It's this idea that, you know, it's not just that there's, you know, this concept of AI as applied to high frequency trading. You know, if you look at the big banks, Goldman Sachs, you know, JP Morgan, what Deutsche Bank, whatever, you know, a lot of these big banks, they employ lots of professional human traders who engage in high frequency trading. And a lot of these guys, they're building their own algorithms, they use their own sort of scripts, they use their own tools. And one of the things I think about is, you know, if you're using public blockchains, you know, I think the very idea of high frequency trading, you know, occurring on public blockchains, I could see these big firms investing into and developing their own competing. I could see several different sort of AIs that are optimized towards high frequency trading. And I kind of see them analyzing the strategies of all of these different traders and essentially outcompeting them over time. I see that as a very real possibility. And I wonder what the future of high frequency trading relates to. One of the things I think is, well, if you have a future where AIs wind up outcompeting, you know, traditional high frequency traders, well, where are they going to go? What's going to happen to them? Are they going to want to actively compete for trades on public information networks? And I think an unintended consequence might be that actually, you know, you might see a future in which human high frequency traders looking to maximize their edges may wind up moving to privacy focused blockchains and privacy focused trading systems where their activity can't be so easily analyzed and therefore is less prone to the effects of third-party analysis and predictive predictive trading. So I was just wondering if you guys had any thoughts on that.
I'm just thinking about my Christmas dinner that I'm digesting. So
I think that it's very interesting and important point that you highlighted, and I would like to add that I think it's important to have exchanges that allow you to to swap assets in a private way. So you wouldn't be able to analyze data from that exchanges in any way, or even it would be better if you can be assured that the exchange itself can has no access to that data.
In a
Yeah.
way, like basic swap is working towards that, and it's in part way there, right? Dr. Cap.
Yeah, I think I think in terms of core
Some
architecture,
kind of,
we're there. Just for those.
I'm sorry, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. No, I was going to say in terms of that core
Hello.
Oh, yeah. No, we can hear you, Cryptosol.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I haven't interrupted. And for instance, I know that there are some such protocol existed, and we at Zano actually came up with the Ionics 4 protocol, where you can privately exchange two kind of assets inside the blockchain. So and other techniques existed. So I think it's important to have such instruments and to use such exchanges that would allow it to do it in a private way. And actually, it's a very interesting point, because it's next level of privacy, not privacy of the transfer itself, but the privacy of trading. So it's it's going higher and deeper. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it's actually a very good point, and the field that would be interested for traders who would like to hide their trades.
Crypto. So you had mentioned the assets on Zano earlier too. Could you explain a little bit more about those assets? I mean, is it an asset kind of like a token that you'd have on Ethereum, like an ERC20 token? Is that the right way to think about it?
It's kind of a token. It's not like Ethereum, because we are not running an EVM. So it's a kind of it's kind of token that you are able, using an API, you can issue your own token, for instance, for arbitrary amount, and then you can transfer this. You are owner of this token. You can transfer this token inside the Zano blockchain, and it will be transferred in a very private way. So the external observer wouldn't guess what token being transferred in a particular transaction. So that's the point.
Okay. Yeah.
And at the same time, using Ionic swaps, you can, in a one transaction, you can swap, you have two different assets as an inputs, and you have the same amount of two different assets, or three different outputs with two different assets as an output. And this person, two person exchange their assets, different assets, in one transaction. So it's just an example that could be used to facilitate this kind of interaction to hide the trading.
Right. And what the tokens represent, what these assets are, that's all managed off chain, right? So there's, you say, okay, this token A means something that's managed, separately from the Zano blockchain, and token B means something else that's managed by somebody else. Is that how it works?
Yeah, exactly. So it's token that would be managed by external mechanism. For instance, one would like to create token for stable coin, I would suggest, and then manage this token and keeping it in a certain level, and so on.
Got it.
No, I think just kind of listening to you, it kind of made me follow this thought through. So it kind of goes back to what you're saying. I think confidential assets and being able to trade confidential assets with genuine privacy, and being able to trade currencies with genuine privacy from any kind of outside observer, I think these are absolutely fundamental to establishing the privacy economy, or the privacy liquidity sphere. And kind of following from what I was kind of saying about my thoughts on high frequency trading over public networks and over public information networks, I think what I'm basically getting at is, I think the primary fear is that AIs, or there will be several AIs or an AI that manages to outcompete and outperform every other human on the planet and every other AI on the planet. And it's so good at doing what it does that it captures every single market inefficiency, and it essentially winds up accumulating wealth for whoever its designer is within the public information, within the public liquidity sphere, the public trading sphere. And I think the consequence of that is that this is going to be abstract. I'm going to just draw an artificial parallel to a 51% attack. If a singular entity, this is my belief, or my view, is if a single entity were to be so good at trading and capturing wealth and inefficiency relative to everyone else on the planet, over time, it would absorb all of the defined resources in that liquidity sphere. And if it absorbed everything and distributed nothing back, then essentially there would be no distribution of liquidity or assets to basically build infrastructure or enable the real world that would be reliant on that liquidity to function. And so basically what I'm saying is, if that entity captured all of the world's dollars and it just kept trading to keep accumulating more, but it wasn't spending or selling or using that accumulated wealth to develop infrastructure, then essentially it would ironically make that currency more worthless over time. And for the simple reason that if one guy is playing a game so well that everyone else is guaranteed to lose, then after a while, everyone on playing that game is just going to say, I think they're going to be like, okay, we can no longer capture any inefficiencies. We can no longer profit off any trades because this one guy or this one AI is out there winning all the time. Let's just go to a system where this guy can't see what we're doing, or this AI can't see what we're doing. And I think that, and I think the privacy liquidity ecosystem is ripe for a massive expansion in that phase, because ultimately, as you said, the core infrastructure for this stuff is there. What you guys are working on with confidential assets in general, but also, having DEXs, basic swap DEX, we have actually achieved this. We've built the peer-to-peer protocol infrastructure to enable KYC-free, commission-free trading of cryptocurrencies via atomic swaps without third parties being able to see those trades occur. So that's a thing that exists. So I think with the foundations of the privacy ecosystem and economy in place, I think when people realize they can no longer make money in the public liquidity sphere, they're going to start saying, okay, fine, let's just transfer our assets into the private liquidity sphere and trade on this, because at least this way, we don't have to worry about some third-party AI analyzing every single one of our trades and then using that data to eventually outcompete us. So I think in some ways, I'm going to argue that the private liquidity sphere, the privacy, almost creates a certain degree of inefficiency against these sorts of algorithmic AI-type agents. That kind of safeguards us from what I would say is a mass accumulation event into one entity that could compromise the health of an entire economy. That's what I'm arguing. I know it sounds really abstract. I can go on, but I'm going to just stop there and see if you guys have any thoughts.
No, I think it's really interesting. It's an interesting way to look at it. I as you're talking about that, I'm thinking like one of us showing up at the zoo and trading fruits and vegetables with monkeys, right? We dominate them, we'd outsmart them, right? And you're saying, and I agree with this, one way to address that would be for all the monkeys just to move off into their caves that we can't even see and keep dealing with the fruit inside there without our influence, because over time we would just come to collect every banana and every orange, right? So I think, maybe that's exactly right within a specific domain, like one cryptocurrency or something. but writ large, I mean, what would actually happen if we did that? Well, soon the zookeeper would show up, and he's just as smart as we are, and he'd counter what we were doing, right? So in a way, like you get one AI that's out there like dominating some area, probably somebody else is going to show up with an AI that beats it again, right? In some ways, that's like the history of the stock market, right? It's happening now, right? There's algorithmic trading, and they all battling back and forth. So it's interesting to think about. Hadn't thought about that, the impact and the importance of privacy on trading. It's a like really new perspective on things.
No, but it's interesting you say that, the bit about the zookeeper, because you're right, actually. Eventually, it's weird we're saying this, because actually by having this discussion, we can almost predict what's going to happen in advance. So there is a very real future in which loads of liquidity shifts from the public liquidity ecosystem to the private one, because there's just no opportunity for enough people to profit. So then they lose hope and move. But then they move, and then you're right, the keepers, the gatekeepers of these AI or these agents who are performing exceptionally well clock on, and they look at the private liquidity ecosystem and then go, hang on, how can we make the most of this opportunity? And then that kind of leads into the whole sort of, how does AI affect the private liquidity ecosystem? How does it affect the privacy economy? And that's kind of and certainly how does AI affect privacy blockchains? That's kind of where I want to kind of go to. Have you guys got any thoughts just before I?
That was my thought, Dr. Cap, on that.
Yeah, no, I think the zookeeper thing is really interesting, but I'm just sort of thinking, how would you go about, if you had an AI agent, what would you utilize AI for in terms of analyzing privacy-based blockchains? That's something I'd be keen to get some thoughts on. My first thoughts would be, okay, the traditional thing would be, do something like chain analysis, but better. And I'd be thinking, where's the exact interface point between a public liquidity sphere and a private liquidity sphere? And then, well, now we can kind of potentially identify who is acting as the interface points between these two liquidity ecosystems. And then, it comes down to the whole legislation against privacy coins and privacy in general. It's like, oh, this is an ecosystem for money laundering, all kinds of bad things. It needs to be stopped. How are we going to stop it if it's thriving away, says, state governments who feel threatened by an alternative liquidity system? And they'll probably go, well, let's look at these interface points a bit better, because the current technologies we've got in place, things like basic swap DEX and privacy coins and privacy technologies like PivX, Firo, Zano, Monero, etc. They provide means for obfuscating transaction flows from third parties. They provide means to obfuscate the flow of liquidity from the public liquidity ecosystem, i.e. fiat and public blockchains. It provides means to shift it into a much more private domain where it can then be spent and used accordingly. But then, there has to be an interface point. And I've kind of always been saying, look, if you look at basic swap DEX, we're the hosts today, I envisage a future in which CBDCs the protocols for them could be integrated into our DEX. And then, we can make the two-way swaps look like one-way gifts, because we're an atomic swap DEX that basically allows that. But, if you've got an AI agent that is analyzing that, I wonder, is that a potential weak spot? The very interface, will that become a weak spot? And that's kind of where my headspace goes.
I actually think that's a great metric or threshold that we should look for in a CBDC before we accept it. You should be able to use it on basic swap and swap it for cryptocurrency without it being visible. Because absent that, it's just a tool of control, right? So that's, I think a very good threshold. I don't think that they're going to get the first version of a CBDC right, and you won't be able to do that. That would be my guess, right? They're going to somehow have it centrally controlled or visible. You just won't. They're going to have that kind of thing in mind. But ultimately, to have something that like really works as currency, it needs to be able to function in that role, just as that role you paint, Dr. Cap.
Yeah,
Basic
I
swap
know.
decks.
Loads of promos today, but in all seriousness, this goes, this feeds into that whole thing of CBDCs. You can analyze every transaction, potentially censor it, but also that is a lot of end user public data. I think I've mentioned this on a few previous spaces, but I'll mention it here. My thoughts in relation to privacy and CBDCs are simple. If I was a government operating a CBDC, then if, completely speaking objectively, if I was a government operating a CBDC, the first thing I would do is I would go, how can we analyze every single user's retail? How can we analyze every single user's retail and shopping habits? Because traditionally, in the private, what would happen is with fiat, okay, in the private sector, retail users, they'd sign up to Facebook, Google, Amazon, all kinds of third-party services, and they would essentially, inverted commas, volunteer their personal information to be shared on these networks and volunteer for that data to be analyzed by private corporations. Whereas with CBDCs, you now have a tool that allows for not just mass surveillance, but mass data analytics. And a government could easily go, right, forget social credit, how can we make money off this? Can we harvest the user data and particularly their retail spending habits and then sell that back to private companies to make a profit for our coffers? And I see that as an inevitability for CBDCs. And I kind of, going back to the topic of, the advent of AI on our privacy, I think I can see AI playing a huge role in terms of going back to all the problems we've said about the difference between objective and subjective interpretations. I could see AI algorithms and AI entities being utilized to try and not just analyze and link the chains of transactions between people and the retail spending habits, but to just outright predict what people are going to buy with high levels of accuracy. And then how that translates, well, does that translate to more money for the guys in government? Does that translate to more money for the employees in government, whether that's legally or through some backhanded corruption? I don't know. Does that translate to lower taxes for the residents of those nations? I don't know.
It's always more money for the people closer to government, right? That's the rule.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In my ideal world, I'd like to think if a government was in a nice world, it would be like, okay, pay fewer taxes as the trade-off for giving up all of this sovereign data. But you're right. It will just wind up being more money for someone who is going to hoard it to themselves. That's realistically what's going to happen, and probably use all of that data to persecute and go after people. Yeah. Sorry, I've kind of rambled on a bit, but I just want to open this up to you to the floor, if that's okay for you guys.
I don't have anything particular to add, but I do just want to say that just because Crypto Solar was talking about confidential assets as well, and Firo is also kind of working towards something like that using a different mechanism.
I'm going to go with that.
Oh, okay. All right, now I can hear
Hello?
you.
Yes, Ruben, you were coming through. Yes, please. Continue.
Oh, no, because, Solar was saying Zano's doing confidential assets, and that's something that Firo has also been working on. I mean, it's not directly relevant to the AI stuff that we've been talking about, but more about I'm just thinking about the long-term survival of privacy coins,
Ruben, I cannot hear anyone.
You cannot hear?
Oh.
All right, no worries.
Oh, I can hear you, Ruben.
I can hear Ruben as well.
Let me just ping. I'll just ping.
So my point was thinking of more of like an existential crisis on privacy coins, right? Like, can we just exist as pure privacy cryptocurrencies, or are we doomed to, irrelevance if you just stick as payment mechanisms, right? And obviously, I do think, like, personally, I do think there is room for multiple privacy coins, especially if they're like doing different things, doing different privacy protocols, have different
Right.
approaches, different emissions. I definitely think there is, but right now, obviously, there is that worry that, is Monero already like the only coin that we can use for like private-ish payments, right? That's like currently the case of what it is, and there's a lot of like doomsayers are saying, what's the point of your coin? There's already Zcash, there's already Monero. What's the point of your coin? And I mean, I see their point, right? Of course, like we had doing our own privacy protocol with different stuff and all of that. But at the same time, I do think that the idea of confidential assets, basically, we are not just going to remain just as a cryptocurrency. I mean, yes, we are a cryptocurrency, but we are also enabling other people to build on our chains to enjoy our privacy. And the thing is that, we always talk about how privacy likes the crowd, anonymity likes company. And one of the biggest issues, especially for smaller chains like ourselves, unless like you're one of those privacy coins that span their own transactions to stimulate transaction volume, and you can't really tell because they are private anyway, right? But let's say if you don't do that, right, and you want like genuine organic usage, one way besides payments is to get people to build on your chain for these assets. And because asset types are indistinguishable, the anonymity set for every single other transaction on the chain, whether it's Firo, whether it's Zano, whether it's like some stablecoin or dot coin, increases together. So I mean, it's not directly relevant to AI. I just thought it was an interesting point, more of an existential thing. Like, what is our project about? Are we just going to be remaining as just a privacy payments, which I think is important, or are we going to be embracing a larger community? Because I think at the end of the day, we want more users. All our chains want more users, right? And one of the ways is to enable confidential assets. We also are enabling like confidential NFTs and all of that. So that's interesting, and I think that's also a route that Beam is also exploring. So yeah. Anyway, I will stop shilling, and I just wanted to bring that up.
No, I think that's great, Ruben. I think that there should be more variety and more coins. I mean, the person saying, why do you really need something if we have Monero? Well, why is there more than one species of fish in the sea, right? Some fish live deep in the sea, some live on the surface, some can fly, some dig in the mud. Some are
everything
big, some
should be salmon.
Right. Oh, everything. Right. Right. But the minute everything is salmon, then now there's opportunities. So it's right? It's opportunities for new fish species to come. So I think that you're doing the right thing, and the key is to find a niche, right? Be good at something that Monero doesn't necessarily do, right? And there's your how you make a living. Just like some fish that figures out how to crawl across land to a new body of water can beat salmon.
I'm keen to hear what Solar has to say, because he's also doing confidential assets. So just like, I mean, like I guess like if you want to continue on the AI thing, don't let me hijack the conversation. But it is something that I do want to hear from the Zano team. Like what is their viewpoint on enabling confidential assets? I think it's also particularly relevant given that Zcash Zuko stepped down, right? So he's no longer leading the ECC. Well, he's not stepping down from Zcash, but he's no longer leading ECC, and Josh Sweetheart stepped into place, and he is all about enabling confidential assets as well. So I do think we are entering into an interesting time where a bunch of privacy chains are enabling confidential assets. So that's why I was very curious to hear what Soul, I don't know how to pronounce it. Soleil.
Crypto Soul.
Everything is that works for you. Yeah, it's fine. I would like to add that ecosystem of anonymity projects like Firo and Zano Monero together. It's a very important thing. And speaking of confidential assets that guys from Firo are working on also, I think it's maybe important to mention that creating an anonymity bridges or like interface interaction point between projects, like for instance between Firo and Zano, quite an important step in this fighting against this AI-powered analysis, and also addressing that what Dr. Cap said about the interface points would be the weaker point, and the more attention would be brought to this point using the AI tools. So maybe in the nearest future we'll see that anonymity coins, and especially coin that uses confidential assets in an anonymous way, works on anonymity interface points between them, like anonymity bridges, and it would be a nicer solution, and maybe we would be stronger against such an attack.
I think one thing I want to add, and I think this is a really good point, is I'd like to see confidential assets being linked to real-world assets, and I'd like to see the framework legally for that to evolve, for legal recognition that clearly links the ownership of confidential assets to actually a genuine ownership of a real-world asset. I think that's a really powerful driver for the privacy economy moving forward. I think an unintended consequence of if you had mass surveillance augmented by AI on steroids is, we've covered the risks and we've covered, some of the upsides to this as well. But, at the end of the day, I don't think I think there are plenty of people who don't want to know, oh, okay, I don't want the entire world to know that I've just sold my house to this particular person. I don't want the entire world to know that I've just, traded this particular asset, this real world asset, to X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that potentially compromises my personal safety. And in a weird kind of way, I feel like all this underlying architecture will stand us in good stead for, actually having, I'm going to say a sovereign state that's founded on privacy. Like, I'd love to just see a nation or some sort of nation type entity that has just the default of we're using privacy coins, we're using privacy technology, we're using privacy focused confident, we're just using, everything has to be private. Nothing is, okay, these transfers of assets, they are obfuscated from third parties for all of the reasons that we kind of discussed. I think it is exciting to see the diversity of technologies emerging to solve these problems, but also to solve these problems in slightly different ways to each other. I think that's valuable.
I gotta hop off now. It was nice having you around and nice chatting. So I'll catch you guys later. But thanks for inviting me, and glad I could join, even though it was like kind of short notice.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Ruben.
And no, just want to sort of thank all of you guys today for sort of coming along. I think we're coming into about an hour and a half now, so actually it does seem like a nice point to sort of wrap things up. Before we go, should we open this up to questions from the audience? Basic swap. Cangrejo, thoughts?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Anyone listening?
We haven't gotten any questions yet, but if somebody also wants to speak up, you're more than welcome to raise your hand in the space, whether it's about the topic or about something you're curious about when it comes to Zano or one of the other projects participating here. I would say something I gathered from all of this that I thought was interesting is really AI. I think we can expect to be for it to be weaponized in both ways of this sort of privacy tug of war. And I loved what CryptoSoar was saying about how it's going to be used as well to code review and probably bring us new privacy ideas that we have never thought of. So.
CryptoSoar, I was just going to say, do you have any sort of closing remarks before we sort of wind things up?
Yeah, before we have any question from my audience, I would like to thank you guys for the invitation. I do appreciate it. It's been a very interesting dialogue and very interesting talk, and yeah, a lot of interesting things that we as anonymity projects need to think about in the future, in the near future. And I think a lot of interesting things for us at Zano also were said during this talk. So yeah, thank you all.
Thank you for joining and sharing your exciting project.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we love meeting you guys at in Mexico at the conference, and we're really happy to see you guys thrive.
Yeah, the same here. And I just want to say, if you guys want to come back on anytime, you're always welcome to join us on any of these spaces. We really enjoyed having you, so it's been great.
Yeah, I hope everybody have a great Christmas.
Did we have a hand up in the audience? I saw .ws. No, heading out. Okay. Okay. No, thanks, Kangreo. I just want to say, I hope everyone who's been listening, hope you all appreciated that. I just want to wish you guys a Merry Christmas. Yen, I should wish Ruben as well, and CryptoSoul. Hope you guys have a lovely sort of festive break. And yeah, as always, good chatting. And hopefully we'll reconvene after the new year.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, guys, and have a nice holidays. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Happy holidays.